Hello, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Armed bandits are killing even armed police in broad daylight. Citizens complain of insecurity. The security insists, together with the president, insists there is no insecurity in Ghana. In a can, it is said, if you don't sell your sickness, you don't get the medicine or the healing for it. Where are we heading? And what are the solutions to the brazen criminal conduct in broad daylight in Accra and elsewhere? How many Ghanaians have been vaccinated so far? Not a quarter. And yet, there is vaccine politics in the country. Where can we find the solutions to secure the citizens against coronavirus? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and I am Samson Ladia Nyenini. And here's my take. Minerals Commission demands $1,000 for RTI requests. That's about 6,000 Ghana cedis. In the first RTI suit by Lowland Sego Moses, Caitlin Adri, and others of the Citizen Ghana movement to compel disclosure of information about the infamous 3.6 million bus branding saga, the Human Rights High Court set the amount to pay at 1,000 Ghana cedis. Our Lord Denning, Justice Anthony K. Yeboah, upheld the right of citizens to information under Article 21(1)(f) of the Constitution in the absence of an RTI Act in April 2016. In July 2020, the court, presided over by the bold spirit Justice Gifty J. Ado, upheld the right of Ashaman MP Ns Nogwe to information regarding how the EC procured services of consultants for its IT and biometric systems. She fixed a fee of 1,500 Ghana cedis, but the EC was unhappy about that judgment and filed an appeal. But the Court of Appeal didn't waste time at all in throwing that appeal out. On Thursday, June 18, 2021, she reduced to 1,500 Ghana cedis the NCA's demand for 2,000 Ghana cedis for information sought by the Media Foundation for West Africa on the back of the closure of radio stations by the NCA. In all these instances, the courts failed to do one thing: apply the demands of reasonableness or the law. If this were the intent of the law, there would have been no need for it at all. The courts fixed the fees without ascertaining the exact amount required to reproduce the information sought. Let me tell you this. In the EC case, the MP was ordered to pay 1,500 only to realize it was for information on only 2 sheets of paper. 2 sheets of paper. How much does reproduction of information on 2 sheets of paper cost? 1,500 photocopy. The law's requirement is that Where fees must be paid, the amount must cover only the cost of reproducing the information that has been sought. According to the law, efforts made or time spent generating the information must not be liable to a fee. The reason is simple. The effort of time is what the taxpayer already pays the public officer each month on the job. In fact, the original idea, as reflected in the parliamentary debate, was for information requested to be supplied free of charge, because the money used to generate the information is tax money, and the public officers work for the people and must account to them. Section 75 commands that personal information in the public interest, and information sought by persons with disability must be supplied free of charge. Some public officers are beginning to make nonsense of the law. The Media Foundation for West Africa, that helped train public officers on the law and is now testing it, including through its online publication, The Fourth Estate, has again sought information from the Minerals Commission to assist the Galamsey fight. And the commission is demanding some 6,000 Ghana cedis, that is $1,000, for information on each request about licenses it has issued, revoked, and money made from annual monitoring fees for excavators. Well, like the NCA, the Commission CEO makes this absolutely absurd demand intended to deny requests to supply the information when Section 85 of the RTI Act, Act 989, prohibits reference to any other law in determining a request for information under the RTI law. How much is a pen drive if you are reproducing the information on a pen drive? How much is a CD-ROM, or photocopy, or the cost of printing the information that the citizen requires? The information is generated with the citizen's tax. The Executive Secretary of the RTI Commission, Yao Sapong Boateng, has warned against charging fees other than an amount constituting the actual cost of reproduction of the information requested. He explains fees proposed by the Commission are for the token they ought to be and reflect international standard fees for RTI requests. Mr. Sapong, together with the chairman, who is retired Justice of the High Court, K.A. Oforiatta, on Thursday, assured citizens that the Finance Minister should soon forward the schedule of fees to Parliament to take away the discretion being exercised in the most absurd fashion to defeat the purpose of the law. In the meantime, I will encourage the Media Foundation for West Africa and all others to continue to fight to achieve the principal purpose of the law for all of us. The Commission has started work and is attending to your appeals free of charge. You will not need to go to court. It has announced it is receiving appeals by email to rti@rti.gov.gh or by post to P.O. Box YK 1179, Kanda, Accra. That's my take, and that's your legal light. Don't be proud that you are saddling citizens with unreasonably absurd fees for information that they pay you every day to generate on their behalf. We'll be right back to get into the very vexed matters that we are canvassing for you this morning.
The short ceremony to hand over the brand new VW Salon vehicle to host of Newsfile was witnessed by some staff and management of the multimedia group, the Minister of Information, Kojo Ponkroma, and national executives of the Ghana Journalists Association. The locally manufactured vehicle, according to the Information Minister, was sponsored by the Office of the President. Samson Ladi Ayeneni, speaking shortly after the handing over ceremony, said he will continue to uphold the tenets of good journalism.
My expectation was that there was going to be a presentation of a laptop or something like that. I had no expectation of a vehicle. So it's yet another surprise, and I am very thankful to the awards committee, to the GJA, and ultimately to the minister, to the president for the decision to donate this car for this purpose. Thank you all, and I want to commit that I'll continue to make myself available to champion credible and fearless journalism.
President of the Ghana Journalists Association, Arthur Money, speaking at the event, observed that the selection of Samson Ladi as the best journalist of 2019 did not come with the usual controversy associated with the ultimate winner of the awards. Mr. Money said this is an indication of Samson Ladi Ayeneni's professionalism.
It is true that many Ghanaians are incurably MPP. Some are intractably NDC. In between the two sides are relatively few journalists with independent streak and objective bent. And these are the qualities Samson represents.
Okay, so that was an ambush by my production team. And I'll see the punishment that I can mete out to Samuel Dami for doing this. But thank you very much. All right, so let me start on the note that...
But congrats.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
You really deserved it.
Thank you, sir.
No doubt about that.
Thank you. Let me start on the note that if you see me in this outfit, and some of you have started commenting on the outfit already, it's from Havel's Couture. And Havel's Couture is an in-house tailoring, fabrics, and accessories. And on Father's Day, they have been doing some very special giveaways for people who want to get dresses, very nice ones like the one I'm wearing, for their fathers. And you can call them on 020 200 0200 841 8988. So let me take the number again, 0200 841 988. You can find them at Ajiringano Gates, East Legon. Thank you very much. And this show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. DBS Industries. Robert & Sons, seeing is believing. Waylead, home is where one starts from. Star Assurance, your solid partner. First Code Management Service. Industry, get it right. The new school, knowledge, compassion, and leadership. Let me introduce my guest to you so we start this program this morning. Our regular panelist and editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper, you just heard a while ago, Abdul Malik Kubako is here. And for those of you following on social media, I have posted a photo of his documents that he has brought into the house this morning, bags of documents. Kwame Sapong Esiedu is pharmacist and fellow, Ghana Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you once again, as always, for making the time to join us, Kwame.
And thank you, Samson, and congratulations, and good morning to listeners.
Thank you. Here, The man who has joined this show from the United States of America is now live and colored here in the studio. Dr. Samuel Kojoamu-Akohene is an anesthesiologist, a COVID-19 ICU team leader at ECHN Health Network Connecticut. He's co-founder and president of Global Partnership, Halodyne LLC. Thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thanks for having me, Samson, and congratulations again on the incredible award you received.
Thank you very much. And we will deal with COVID-19 matters briefly and spend the majority of the time on matters of security. And we'll be joined by Emmanuel Bombande, who is UN Senior Mediation Advisor and former Deputy Minister, Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. I'm sure many of you associate and know him with his work as a mediation advisor or expert. Professor Kwesi Ening, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, will also join us. So, let's begin with Kwame Sapong-Asiedu. So, take us back. How many of Ghanaians have so far been vaccinated, and how does it look? When are we likely to get Ghanaians actually in the vaccination?
Okay, so we would say around 400,000 Ghanaians, give or take, have been fully vaccinated. And then you've got another between 500,000 and 600,000 roughly who've had one dose of the vaccine. So that is the current state of play. To say when we're going to get vaccines, looking at the latest data, which I did yesterday, if you understand the vaccine technology, a number of countries did keep vaccines in stock. And because these are relatively new vaccines, their shelf life, which is the time between when they are manufactured and the time when they expire, is normally about 6 months. So there are some vaccines, especially in the United States predominantly, which are coming close to the end of their shelf life, which my expectation is would be hitting the supply chain. And they would be hitting the supply chain based on the preferences of the countries who are holding these vaccines. So you're talking about like the United States, as I did say last week at the G7, have promised 500 million doses. That would be hitting the supply chain from about July, early August. But one thing they'll be looking at is countries that can roll those vaccines out pretty quickly because they are close to the expiry date. And there, I think Ghana has a bit of an advantage because of what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the fact that when those vaccines were sent to Ghana close to their expiry date, we were able to still roll them out very quickly. And so that would be a good thing. The other thing I'd want to say is that if those vaccines are Johnson & Johnson, there would be a second advantage, be it the fact that they are single-dose vaccines. So unlike the AstraZeneca and Sputnik, where you have to have 2 doses, the minute the people are vaccinated, 21 days after the injection, they would have gotten their maximum or optimum immunity, which would then mean that our quest towards herd immunity the pace might increase slightly. But from there to the end of the year, the route looks a bit charted because Serum Institute of India is not coming back on stream until the 8th of December. Biological E are saying 15th of November. And they are the ones who are producing. Serum Institute produces the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is Covishield, and Biological E are producing Johnson & Johnson. So that's where the trick is. So I'd leave it at that.
So what's the danger that up to this point, we cannot boast of even a quarter of Ghanaians being vaccinated, those who are supposed to get their jabs getting it. And we continue to delay and push the time for those who are supposed to get their second dose. We continue to push it forward, suggesting as if, you know, now we are being told that even the more you wait to get the second dose, all the better. I don't get the explanation that is coming forward, because what we have been made to understand was that you get your first dose and then the date for the second dose, we have spaced it long enough. Now it does appear for as long as we are not getting the vaccines, we have good excuse.
Samson, no, I think I need to provide a bit of technical clarity here. First and foremost, when these vaccines were taken through their phase 3 trials, the time between the first and second dose for most of them was 3 weeks. So if you look at the United States, for example, they've kept to that protocol because that was what the Food and Drugs Authority in the US licensed, gave the emergency use authorization for both Moderna and Pfizer for. But when the UK's Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunization looked at the total data from the clinical trials, they decided that even though it was 3 weeks during the the trial stage, there was sufficient data to spread it out to up to 3 months, and that if you did that and spaced it within 12 weeks, the spike of antibodies following the second dose is much higher, and the extent of immunogenicity is longer. But that was the data they had then. As things are going on, data is rolled out. Even yesterday, data came out from Public Health England saying a single dose after 14 weeks gives you a 79%, protection against hospitalization. So like I'm saying, the data is evolving. If you look at it at the moment, you would always see that Canada, for example, has a protocol where it's using 16 weeks. The length between doses is actually 4 months in places like British Columbia and Vancouver and other things, because the data points to 16 weeks, the antibodies being detectable at titers that confer protection. So I can understand the anxiety of the citizenry, don't get me wrong, because I would have gone with the 12 weeks. But I can also understand from a biomedical science standpoint that as the data comes, people are making informed decisions as they move along. You can argue that in places like Canada, where they've gone to 4 months, they have the vaccines anyway. But the point they are making is that because the data on a single dose is showing that it cuts the link between hospitalization and mortality, they would rather give more first doses and give the second dose after 4 months so that they can cut that link and minimize the chances of people dying. In our case, we are making the decision because we cannot get hold of the vaccines. But the good thing is the data seems to be giving us a bit of hope. And that's why I can understand the angst of the citizenry, but I can also not run away from the data as I review it, as Public Health England, Public Health Scotland, Clelit in Israel, FDA in the United States are reviewing it and putting it out in official documentation. And some of us are reading it and say, oh, what they are saying is not backed by science. At this point in time, that information is backed by science, and that is why I've given countries who have actually informed policy, like Canada, based on the new data.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be playing for all of us to hear what the president has been saying about the attempts to get local vaccine production, and also the minister as well, Kwajman Menu, what they have to say about what we can do going forward. But do you think we are getting late, having spent all the time in wait for the third party that we had hoped will get us some vaccines, and from what the government has shown us so far, they have failed so terribly. All the timelines that they were giving. They had delivery schedule, that is Sheikh Ahmed, I'm sure we have heard about that, about the Sputnik vaccine supply. On the 3rd of March, they brought in 15,000 of the Sputnik vaccines. They delivered that. Then they were expected to bring in 185,300, right? That was not delivered at the end of March. Then April, 300,000 was expected, 600,000 also. That was not delivered. Then in May, 600,000 and then 1 million was not delivered, and then in June 1 million doses, or 1.4, was also not delivered. The total of 3.4 million doses that was expected. This is where we are. We have pushed the dates over and again, and we are at this point, and yet there's no delivery. What are we required to do urgently to avoid circumstances that might hurt our country?
Thanks, Samson. I mean, I made this clear last week, and I'll repeat it again. It is clear that these guys are unable to deliver because they are only left with the July date. If you have 5 dates and they've reneged on 4, it would be strange to sit down and expect them to deliver on the 5th. At this point, I think there are enough breaches of that contract for the government to opt out. And I think there's enough grounds for them to opt out, because even if they deliver now in July and the supply chain improves in August, at the cost that they are selling to us, there wouldn't be any value for money. So that I am clear in my mind that the government has to abrogate the contract. However, what we have to do, the truth of the matter is, we can only rely on the vaccine supply chain improving. We cannot do a lot because we are bystanders. And sometimes people do not want to hear the fact that we are bystanders. But if you are not at the table of men with your hands in the food, you don't get to eat at the same time as the men who prepared the food. And that's the situation we find ourselves in. So I think the best bet now is for us to learn. I am quite sure this virus is not going anywhere anytime soon. There will be other clinical trials. There will be other vaccine development. We need to get to the point where there will be the political will for us to be involved in some of these things.
All right.
When we have the political will and we get involved, then yes, when vaccines are coming, we would also be at the table.
All right. Now, Dr. Makohene, from where you sit, where you are coming from, they rolled out a plan and immediately started to work, and the population, you know, greatly vaccinated and getting back to normal. Now, in the wake of fears of a third wave, how do you see what we have done so far, and what is the path that we should be charting to avoid plunging our citizens into a mess?
Well, good morning, and thanks again for having me on the show. I think it's really important when it comes to vaccination regarding COVID-19, because we know, as you've kind of alluded to, the fact that there's now a third wave, which is happening across the globe. You know, when you look at India, the Delta variant that has really happened, every indication is that even people who have been vaccinated are now coming down with COVID-19, and some are succumbing to the virus. And so you ask yourself, in the developed countries, in America, in Canada, some of these places that we all know very well. For example, in the US, when the vaccination came on board back in December, most people were eager about, when am I going to get vaccinated? Now today, when I left the US, in New York City, most people are not wearing masks, because people are getting vaccinations. If you want it today, you can get it. And the goal for doing that was to ensure that we really do not go through a third wave. So that has been huge, because if you don't vaccinate your people as quickly as possible, then you leave yourself open for having these variants sort of becoming rampant in your economy, and the ramifications we are fully aware. And so for us in Ghana, having been here for days now, and sort of going through streets and how many people are wearing masks, and sometimes even watching people, you sort of, oh my goodness, what's going on? I think if you bring everything to who we are as citizens or as a nation, we have to really consider one thing. Do we have the resources? Should we have a third wave? What will be the ramifications? What will be the consequences? So the one example that comes to mind is when you look at Israel. They decided to make a decision, which was, do we allow ourselves to go through many or multiple waves of this variant, or do we go aggressive? Do we stay more proactive by doing everything we can to acquire vaccines and vaccinate our citizenship? so that we can basically get back into economic activity and freedom and avoid a third wave. So I think as a country in Ghana, what we need to do is to really find ways and work with the right people. I mean, I think the word middleman has been thrown around quite a bit.
Yes, because the government feels that even though the most appropriate thing to do is to do government-to-government,
Right.
transaction for the vaccines. If you are not doing government-to-government, as we understand, the government has actually been advised that you look for manufacturer connections. Don't deal with people who are not connected to the manufacturing
Correct.
or are not the government.
Correct.
But our government also feels that it is doing its best and it's not getting what it needs to get for the citizens. If it will get it through middlemen, why not?
Great question. I mean, I have been in contact with my colleagues in Canada and the US and even within the Southern African countries like South Africa. Like when you take South Africa or the Southern African countries, most of those countries are now going through a third wave where they actually have curfews. They cannot get vaccines. I mean, South Africa is a different situation, as we all know. So getting vaccines is not an easy task. Talking to my colleagues, for example, in Canada and the US, what I know is the fact that you need middlemen are used everywhere. I mean, I think unless you are the developed countries who really have the resources where you can go from essentially where they set up committees to do these purchases, you have to go through the right channels. So it's okay to use middlemen. You have to factor a lot of things into consideration though when you do that. For example, the Sheikh Ahmed situation that we're talking about, I think Kwame is absolutely right. When a person has not been able to deliver, or any group has not been able to deliver, I mean, I'm not here to make any proclamations, but it's clear that most likely that's not going to happen. You just need to find the right channel, the right resources, the right group. And with that, I believe we can get some vaccines. I do have an intel or information that may be able to help Ghana in getting what we need. But again, it comes down to really getting the right information and talking to the right team. There's no way I'm going to be able to sit here and, in my own heart, believe that a person who has not been able to deliver on 3 different occasions is suddenly going to be able to come up with million doses of vaccines. And the last point I'll make is the fact that right now the supply-demand curve is really what's really controlling everything. So if you look at the many countries that are willing to pay in excess of $20 per dose, and we are here in the country thinking about, do we go for the money now versus the financial implications in their lives? If you could place money or value on a human life, if you could, do we value that more versus spending the money like what the Israelis did, the Israelites did, and getting people vaccinated so that we don't go through a third wave like India? So I think I conclude by saying that we just need to, continue to be proactive and really be at the forefront so that we can really get our citizenship vaccinated, because we're in a whole new situation. We're living in a continent where development is not our forte. We do like some few things that we totally can benefit from as a country. And so I think it's important that we put all that into consideration and ensure that we can do the best we can to vaccinate our people.
All right. Before we hear from the President and the Health Minister and 2 other persons who have spoken about looking for local manufacturing of the vaccines as a way out, Kwame, last week we spoke about the middleman connection thing, and here on the show I asked the question whether the controversy surrounding the middlemen bringing and not bringing, and they actually in the contracts suggesting that if anything happened they will not be held liable and so on and so forth, whether that will feed into vaccine hesitancy. We already have vaccine hesitancy. Whether that will feed into that a lot more, I think you were all in consensus that that will also not help. Now, the FDA found that to be a situation where it needed to intervene. So it issued a press release to give assurance that the quality of the vaccines are good and they are safe and they are efficacious. Now, they say, and I need to read this part of the statement, they say that today the FDA has authorized the importation, distribution, and use of the 3 COVID-19 vaccines as follows: Sputnik V, COVID Shield, and then J&J. And they say that it is important to note that all these vaccines have been authorized for use in several countries across the world. For instance, Sputnik V has been authorized in 71 countries, COVID Shield in 170 countries, and Johnson & Johnson in 74 countries. On arrival of consignment, the FDA inspects each batch for compliance with the manufacturer's instructions on product handling and storage to ensure that the integrity of the cold chain has been maintained during transportation. Furthermore, samples are also taken for analysis to ensure that critical quality attributes comply with the approved release specifications from the manufacturer. All these processes are completed before vaccines, including vaccines from the COVAX facility, donation from MTN, and the recently imported Sputnik V, are formally released to the Ministry of Health. Well, in that regard, they say the quality control measures required in the laboratory and required by the regulatory authorities are being followed to the World Health Organization standards, and therefore there's no cause for alarm. Even if a third party or a middleman was bringing it, we are assured that this will be gone through.
I sit here last week and I did say that if you understand the regulatory framework and how vaccines are moved in international commerce, you understand why the WHO gives emergency use authorization for some countries, because they do not have the regulatory gravitas that Ghana has. I mean, Ghana has one of the more robust regulatory authorities when it comes to medicines in Africa. I mean, you cannot take that away from them. And yes, I can, and I did say on here last week, I can agree with a lot of the things they have written. In fact, if they didn't do that, it would be in breach of quality assurance, because you need to sample every batch of a product that you've registered when it's gotten into your country. The issue with the middleman is not about the FDA not doing their job. It is about that middleman not having a contract with the local holder of the emergency use authorization. That's where the issue is. The issue is not about quality, it is about legality. So if I register a product in Ghana and it's within patent, if you want to bring it into Ghana, I either bring it myself or I can franchise someone to bring it, or the manufacturer, in this case, if it's Sputnik, the Russian Development Fund can bring it on behalf of somebody. If a third person is bringing it, because regulation doesn't allow you to register the product twice in the same country, then there are regulatory issues and legality issues there. So to end, what I would say is that, yes, the FDA will do all that. But another thing that the FDA would have to ensure is the collation of the adverse events post-immunization, which is the responsibility of the person who holds the emergency use authorization. That is where the real issue would be when a middleman brings it and issues that disclaimer, albeit the disclaimer is issued by all manufacturers. However, when it comes to the adverse effects post-immunization, it is the responsibility of the local procurer of the emergency use authorization. The question I ask consistently is, if we use a middleman, would the Ministry of Health take over that responsibility and any liability that comes with it?
All right.
We don't have answers, and that is where the problem is. So I don't have issues at all with the FDA's regulatory robustness.
Now, Dr. Mwakohene, what is the standard when you have, middlemen or third parties seeking to help Ghana to get the vaccines, and they are getting the country to sign onto contracts that sort of indemnify them from anything that happens? So if the vaccine is brought and it is used and there is some side effect or something happens that, they say, don't hold us liable. Is that standard?
To be honest with you, I think a lot of these questions come across when you're dealing with people or groups or entities who are trying to insulate themselves from any sort of legal ramifications. Some of the wording or the legal language they put in there is really not necessary. As we all know, emergency use authorization means that we need to use such medications for the reasons for the challenges that we're being confronted with. So to me, that's not even necessary. You don't have to have those sort of protections in purchasing a vaccine as a middleman. It really comes down to having the right group, the right entity, because a lot of these are protected by the international standards. So you don't really need to set all these things or put all these on paper to try to insulate or protect yourself. If you truly believe that you're bringing in vaccines that are being produced, for example, the J&J vaccine that I indicated that we can get as a country.
Yeah, the US says it has millions that it wants to give out. It doesn't want to use anymore, and it's about expiring.
Okay, so if you have that, why should, for example, myself or Uncle Kwaku say that, Samson, you have to protect us, right? If you're doing the right thing, you're delivering the right material and the right medicines, you should not be worried about what I'm bringing into the country. Then it comes down to the fact that these entities may not fully call themselves middlemen. They themselves may be going through different channels in purchasing vaccines. And I think we all as citizenship have to do the best we can to help our country.
Right, now let's listen to, and I'll get Kwaku to give a brief view, even though he's insisting that as you let the experts talk, he'll give us a brief view of it. We'll listen to President Akufo-Addo on bringing in local production. Dr. Kwaku Agyeman-Manu also on bringing in local production. Dr. Nsia Sare has also been speaking about it. You know, he advises the president on these matters. And Haruna Idrisu also is asking for some proof of some sort, whether that is still necessary in the wake of all the explanations that have come through. But some of our viewers and listeners are sending us messages and asking to know whether Dr. Kojo Amoako-Hene is ready and willing to make himself to the Jubilee House to assist in these processes. Let's listen to these people. We'll be right back.
The poorer, less advantaged nations are experiencing in having access to the vaccine. So that, of course, is the major challenge for us, the procurement and the issues of logistics involved in it. It has provided us a very important lesson. Among the many lessons that the COVID has revealed to us, the need for self-reliance in future in these areas. We cannot continue to be dependent on arms and on the charity of foreigners and foreign taxpayers for our basic sustenance. We need to be able to put in place the structures that will enable us in future not to be caught with our pants down. And that is that we have to learn and find the avenue to produce our own vaccines. And I'm particularly keen on providing the assistance for the institutions of our country to do so.
The government has set up a committee for vaccine production, chaired by the Minister for Environment and Science. They have also done a lot of work. Committee members are picked from the scientific world, some in the ministry and other scientific institutions. They are working very fast. They have even visited and they are partnering with private sector companies that were originally also preparing to produce some semblance of vaccines in our country. Looks like 3 of such facilities have been picked up. And they are liaising with the international community to see how they can start working. Their strategy is to try to do what they call filling and packing first, and then the science community will also take some time to start developing vaccines in our country. So that area is also seriously being considered, and we are actually on course in that direction. The African Medicine Supply Platform, we had registered with them. The one they were allocating to us, Johnson & Johnson, had not been released, registered in Ghana, not even elsewhere in the world. And they couldn't give us nothing. The indication was until August. So we didn't have much options to swim around. We had to go for Sputnik. We invited the Deputy Ambassador of Russia to the president's office. He couldn't tell us any significant thing. I was directed to write to the trade minister in Russia, the foreign minister in Russia, all those who mattered in this issue. Our direct contact with RDIF yielded no results. So we didn't have options than to go through middlemen. When we have said right from beginning that we wouldn't use middlemen in trying to procure vaccines. There was pressure back home that the president should make efforts to procure vaccines. We should rely only on the COVAX grant that was coming. What could you have done? We sat down with them, did a lot of negotiations. We agreed on $19. We signed the agreement, right? We were supposed to do LC for the first delivery schedule. Even that, they were not going to supply the 3.4 million at a go. They gave us a schedule of 300,000, then 1 million, 1 million, 1 million, spread up to June from April. We are not very comfortable with that. Our LC delayed for some reasons. When it got to them and it was confirmed, they sent us a message that they had run out of stocks. And up to I speak, they haven't been able to drop one single dose.
Government intends to vaccinate a total of 20 million citizens by end of year. The nation is currently inching closer to 1 million.
Vaccination. So far, we have actually vaccinated 852,047 persons who have had the first dose of vaccination. Then we have another 379,156 people who have so far also received their second jabs out of the 381,000 targeted. We're looking to do 381,000 based on the doses of vaccines that we had, despite the fact that our first jabs went round to 852,000. So here we achieved 98.something% target when we started doing the second dose for AstraZeneca.
The primary responsibility of the president is
the ministry signed a contract. They will look at all the contract terms and see if they have to abrogate it. If you look at that contract, you know, it was 3.4 million, but they were supposed to deliver it, what I read, in batches. Mm-hmm. And they pay only when it has been delivered. And when it's delivered, FDA checks everything before it's even brought into is used in their country. Gotcha. If you have seen what is happening at the airport, anytime any vaccine comes from anywhere, there's check the batch number, where it's coming from, and all sorts of things. So that is what will be done. But I will tell you that His Excellency the President, for that matter, the government is seriously engaged. And as I speak now, we've engaged the U.S. government. We are trying to get vaccines from there, even apart from what is going to COVAX and what is going to the African Union. We've engaged the EU, specifically the British government, to also make sure that we get vaccines into the country to vaccinate our people, as well as the Prime Minister of India.
We are filing an urgent motion on the health sector and to request for a bipartisan probe into Ghana's procurement of COVID vaccines as $26 and not $10 as is the practice in many countries. And for which motion, as I've emphasized, will be to call for a bipartisan probe, because for all intents and purposes, we think that even that transaction is an international economic transaction within the meaning of Article 1815 of the Constitution. Parliament is not aware of it. We would want to appreciate and understand the procurement processes that were used, but more importantly, to demand value for money for the Ghanaian taxpayer, and that we are not just seeking to profit from COVID with this questionable transaction. So, Mr. Speaker, we will file an urgent motion. We've done that. I'm sure the table will give it to you before the close of session.
Right, so you heard the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. You also heard Health Minister Kweku Agyeman-Manu, and then Dr. Nsia Sare, who is a Presidential Advisor on Health, and Haruna Idrisu, the Minority Leader in Parliament, seeking for some probe. Now, Kwame, so the we know that at least 4 local pharmaceutical manufacturers are ready to provide the Ghanaian market with the COVID-19 vaccines. What exactly are we looking at with these local producers? And why didn't we look at this at the very start when we had the difficulties rather than running to questionable middlemen?
Thanks, Samson. I mean, the whole issue around vaccine manufacture is that Africa doesn't have a large manufacturing capacity. There are only 10 sites across 7 countries in the whole of the 55 countries in Africa who actually produce vaccines. And why is it the case? Because historically, diseases that require vaccination have disproportionately affected countries where, standard of living are low, purchasing power parity is low, and all that. So there is not a lot of money involved in the pharmaceuticals of vaccines. COVID has come in and it has tipped that uppercut. And that is why you realize that on average, new vaccines come every 8 to 10 years. This one has come in less than a year. And people are raising questions. It's because of the fact that that dynamic change. It's nothing like Ebola or dengue fever, malaria, and therefore the West do not have to be involved. This time they've had to be involved. What it now means is that African countries have also come to the realization that they cannot be reliant on these countries when a huge pandemic hits to supply them with vaccines, because unlike the diseases that I referred to previously, which do not affect these countries, even if they get the vaccines, they keep them in store for a public health emergency, but they have no real use for them in their country. So they would supply to Africa, like the childhood killer diseases and all that. But when there's a global need, then we go further down the pecking order, because they will prioritize their citizens who pay the taxes to ours. So what basically is happening now is we need to up the game when it comes to vaccine manufacture. You need to look at your pharmaceutical industry. You need to look at those who have the capability to produce vaccines and have what we call the ability to produce under aseptic conditions, because you don't want your vaccines to get contaminated. You identify those. You need to then get into bilateral agreements, because they need to be agreements with the people who hold what we call the market authorization, the people who actually made the vaccines and hold the patents, who will give you authority to manufacture. You need to then go into some form of collaboration to be sure that you can simulate their manufacturing chain, what we call good manufacturing practice. All these things would have to be looked into. And when they are looked into, your local regulator, which is the Food and Drugs Authority, also has to certify that the quality of production is the same as the quality of production in the country from which the vaccine originates for. That is where the political will is needed. And I'm glad that now government has realized, because to answer your question, why didn't we do that? This was what some of us were talking about as far back as May, June last year, that this is the approach to go, because that was what Chile did.
Because I realized, for example, when it came to the masks, immediately the government and mask, and then call it the alcohol rub, the sanitizers, immediately the government gives support to local industries to go into them. And some of the masks locally made, they have been my preferred mask. I think one of the phone company, mattress making companies, either latex foam or ash foam, they make the mask, and you can see the quality difference with what we get from China. So why have we waited all this while?
Yes, I mean, like you said, if you are making alcohol wraps and masks and other things, the technology is much easier. When it comes to vaccines, there's a lot more quality constraints that have to go into, because this is what you are injecting the thing into somebody. You don't want any form of contamination. You also don't want the concentration of what we call the active ingredient in that vaccine to deviate too much from what the standard says. So there's a lot more robustness. And then there's the need to upskill your industrial pharmacy team. I am a pharmacist, and I can tell you that all across Africa, industrial pharmacy hasn't been concentrated on. So even the human resource So when it comes to people who work in drug analysis, who work in quality control, who work in biomedical science, they are not that many in Ghana. Even pharmaceutical industries in Ghana struggle to get some of these people because as far as I can remember, as it stands now, I know when it comes to drug analysis and quality control, the only university that does trading is KNUST Faculty of Pharmacy, the pharmaceutical chemistry department. So if we have to do all these things, those things would have to change. We would have to learn to train people on the job because the FDA also has the capacity to train QA and QC people and all that. So the government involvement is very, very important. And I hope that government is going to match this, not just with words, but with deeds, so that we can get this done.
Great. Now, Dr. Mwakohene, the president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana, Benjamin Kwame Boche, says that they are actually waiting for the green light from the government to start with packaging. Now, as I listen to Minister Kwekua Adjuman-Menu, I can also hear him talk about packing, or is it failing and packing? And then later, the science community will take some time to start developing the vaccines. Can you help explain what this means, that bringing the pharmaceutical, companies locally in Ghana into the system is not really about manufacturing the vaccine?
So it's a lot of the technicalities that you hear has to do with how a vaccine is made. As Kwame was alluding to, you have to, the first phase is to be able to make the vaccines. And then once you make the vaccines, you have to then put into consideration, how are you going to be able to store the vaccines? What for the vials that you're going to be able to put them in? Are you producing them right here? Or are you having those sent to you? So you make the vaccines in those manufacturing plants, but then you also have to look at the ancillary stuff or material that you need. And that is also some of what the Minister of Health was talking about, which is you have to be able to have the vials, if I have to pick that example. You have to be able to have the refrigeration. You have to be able to have the packaging. So when you look at the West, for example, the US, what we did, or what they did at the time was they immediately engaged UPS and DHL and FedEx and all these other sort of companies to really help in delivering vaccines to the various different states or locations. And so I think some of that is what the health minister is talking about. Like, we need to make the vaccines, but we also need to consider how we get all the ancillary equipment and materials in ensuring that the vaccines that we produce are not just being produced and sitting in those manufacturing plants, but that we're able to package them, put them into the right containers and materials to really preserve them such that it can get to the ordinary citizen.
So you think that the state is on the right track in seeking to bring in local manufacturers, and as you listen to the minister, this is good?
I really do believe this is incredible news. One of the things that as I listened to the president, I was humbled by is the fact that we need to be more proactive. We cannot always rely on the West to help us out. In the US right now, we have millions of vaccines. People are not even taking them. Just yesterday or this week, the scientific community in the United States have decided that we've come to the realization that we probably will not be able to get to herd immunity, which is about 70% of our population, right? So we have millions of vaccines that we're sitting on, and yet we can't even get to, countries like Ghana cannot get those vaccines. Speaking to my colleagues within the Southern African country like South Africa, what was told to me was simply the fact that vaccines, as promised on the global stage, that Africa is going to be getting vaccines, they're not coming. And so if you cannot vaccinate your people quickly enough, you are at the risk of having various different variants coming. So it's essential that we really put these efforts in place. And if we can produce our own, I say this, Ghana will be at the forefront. And one thing that we have to always think about, everybody wants to go to the West. Development if you are able to set up these pharmaceutical companies, one of the things that we're going to be able to do is employment for the people. And Ghana would then be able to produce vaccines for the rest of Africa, for example. That alone can change the fortunes of the country.
All right.
So I think it's a great idea if we can put our resources to it.
Thank you very much. In the next 15 minutes or so, we will get on Dr. Kwesi Enin. We will also have Superintendent Sheila Kesi Abeye Bakman, Director of Public Affairs of the Ghana Police Service, and John Ewua, who is CEO, Ghana Association of Bankers, as well as Emmanuel Bombande, to deal with the questions of insecurity in the country. But let me get Kuku's, brief comments on the hope that seems to be coming, however belated, and then I'll have Kwame and Dr. Mwakohene give us their final comments in some 2 minutes each. Yes, Kweku.
Yeah, there's a mixed picture out there. Good news here, and some, not too good news, if I may put it that way. It's a mixture, a mixed bag, but perhaps the potential for us to make progress is also discernible. And I'm going to be very clear on this. Last week, I asked for full disclosure on agreements and contracts that we have entered into.
That's right.
It appears we are dealing with multiple groups. It's important that the public knows which groups are we dealing with, what agreements have we entered into, what contracts have we signed, and what are the objectives, who are they? It helps so that when we are dealing with the issues, we deal with each one on its own merit. Otherwise, we box it up and there isn't any way forward. I still haven't heard a very clear-cut disclosure as to which groups and how many groups we are dealing with. I would want the government to make that important. Now also, we told about contacts that were made with some governments. I thought it was only Russia, but we're now being told about the US, the UK, and the EU. See, information flow, put it out there, let people know. There's an emergency, quote-unquote, situation. There's some desperation, there's some frustration. Few people have been vaccinated. I'm lucky, I've had 2 already. But it appears that those who've had the first one, there's a huge, left over.
Yeah, for example, this texter, Collins Little Tete, he says that, or he's not the other one, there was somebody who said he feels very sad. Okay, that's Prince Henry in Koforidia. He says, I feel sad as a citizen because Ghanaians who have taken the first dose of vaccine don't know their faith, as in when they will get the second dose. Our leaders prefer to fly in most luxurious and expensive flights when the citizens cry for vaccines. So that's very sad. You and I have gotten our double vaccination.
Give out information. Let people, keep them updated. It lessens the frustration and the psychological trauma that some may be going through because of the situation. So that helps. I don't get too much of it. And I think it's part of the problem that we are confronted with. The president's intervention and the things he said, brilliant. Good news. In terms of the concept, in terms of the vision and the declaration, how the roadmap is also critical. How do we go about it? How are we going to operationalize that? It takes me back to the Nkrumah days. I'm sure we still have the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. And you just mentioned the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana.
Right.
Look, there was a National Research Council headed by the president himself, that's Nkrumah. In his absence, my good old man was the acting in his absence for that particular body. You'll be surprised if you go through the documentation. Plant medicine, traditional medicine. All those things were focused on. Of course, they had foreign collaboration from different countries because of the level of development then. I believe the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research is still around. They may be doing some work, but we hardly hear. And how are we connecting them to some of these points that the president has put out there? How are we connecting them? Information, when you are giving that info, it's reassuring, it's therapeutic, it helps.
That's right.
Relative to even the challenge that individuals like the texter is facing. He has hope. He believes that something is on the way. So just not the concept, throw the concept out, let people understand in a very simple terms, then seek to operationalize it, collaborating with bodies like the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, the Pharmaceutical Society of Ghana, and I'm sure there are other relevant groups that do not come to my mind immediately. When we do all these things, it brings clarity and transparency and hope. Then you are building a certain national consensus. Aruna Idrusu may not be asking for a motion, may not be talking about bringing up a motion to seek a bipartisan probe of procurement if there's transparency and things. And I'll be honest with you, on this one, because of the Sheikh Maktoum thing, I'm inclined to accept that let's probe those things. Whilst we are doing things to save lives, it is not mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Let's also probe some of the procurement practices and things we've done. At this stage, it can help us cure any possible mischief relative to procurement practices. Okay? Because otherwise, it's so difficult. We need a national consensus on this matter to fight COVID. You don't need a situation where people will be talking at cross purposes. If we are all together, in spite of our political differences, and are focused on dealing with the enemy, in this case COVID-19,
right,
I think we'll make progress. This is a view of a non-expert.
And it's such a great view from the non-experts. And as part of what Kweku was asking for about disclosure, information, I want to refer to a statement that Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh made some time ago, and it surfaced on social media. I'm seeing it, and I suppose it's on the back of my take, is that a public office belongs to the public. Please, if you're in public office, this is the attitude with which you must be there. A public office belongs to the public, not to the temporary occupant of that office. A tenant is not a landlord. Don't allow yourselves to be taken for a ride, intimidated, insulted, cheated, or impoverished by people you have hired to work for you and who depend on your sweat and taxes for their livelihoods. They are your servants, not your masters. You are a citizen, not a subject. Act the part. Maybe you're waiting for Media Foundation for West Africa to bring an application for information to the Ministry of Health. And then you say either you won't give it to them or they should bring some 2,000. I mean, what's the point? What goes through your mind when a citizen is asking for information, basic information, and you are asking them to pay so much money? And then when they go to court, some of the courts to misconstrue the law's position and say pay so much. And I give you the example. Ernest Nogbe asked for information from the Electoral Commission. The court ordered that he should pay 1,500 for it. Electoral Commission denied him the information. He went to court. Court said Electoral Commission cannot deny him the information, but he should pay 1,500. Guess what? Eventually, when he went for the information, he paid the 1,500. But the information he was giving was on 2 pieces of paper, 2 sheets of paper. And the law says you should only pay for the reproduction cost. Photocopy 2,500. You are in public office. Give the information. Why? It's not yours. It's for the public. Okay. Now, Kwame, what will be your final, comments on how this country should go forward from the path that the president has spoken about, Kweku Adjumamenu has spoken about, that you applaud, that it is the way to go?
Well, I mean, we just have to progress. We have no choice. Because this system we find ourselves in, where now the ministry, Ghana Health Service, are having to give people letters of intent, which is what they're technically doing now, so that when people get the vaccines and they have evidence, they can go into contractual agreements with them. It's a short-term measure. We cannot continue down that route. We need to be able to get to a place where we have actually got a stake in what we are asking for. Like the president said, we cannot rely on what you call goodwill alone. And a lot of African leaders are saying that. So for me, this should be backed with deeds, but it would take a lot of work, like I've said, because we would have to train a lot of human resource. It's not beyond us. India have done it. Like I said, Chile has done it. I know Algeria has done it in Africa as well. So it is not beyond us. We can do it, but it shouldn't be a 9-day wonder. Let's assume that with some bit of luck, the supply chain improves from August because we are getting vaccines from the US and the UK and other things, or the new vaccine that is coming out, Novavax, also joins the supply chain, and things improve, and suddenly we put this on the back burner. Because the truth of the matter is, Samson, I'd end by telling everyone more pandemics would happen. And the likelihood, if you look at the global, population growth rate, is that this time they will come from Africa, because Africa is growing at the quickest. There will be a lot more urbanization. There will be a lot more contact between our citizens and animals in the wild. And as a result, there will be what we call zoonotic diseases. We cannot stop that. China is having it now because now they are urbanizing quickest than the rest of the world because they are going through massive industrialization. If you look at it, if Africa is going to industrialize, we would have our stake. The UK and other things had it with the cholera and all that when they were going through their industrialization. It is something that happens globally, and we need to prepare for it. So we shouldn't make this a 9-day wonder. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kwame Sapong-Asiedu. Thank you always for making yourself available to educate and to assist us in looking for the solutions to the problems, particularly in the health sector. Now, Dr. Thank you. All right. So obviously, when you spoke with the future in mind. What we are doing now, we should also think about the future. Yes, Dr. Makohene, what will be your final words in, like I said to Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, in applauding the path that we have chosen? How do we ensure that we get the results? It does not become just talk. We do too much of it in this country.
That's the point.
So I think with everything that we've talked about and what the country is doing, and for that matter, the presidency or the government is doing, I sort of summarize everything into 3 sort of buckets. And the first point goes to the fact that we have to continue to engage with all the necessary or the right groups in helping us procure or achieve some of these vaccines coming into the country. Whatever we've done in the past, we have to continue to put our foot on the gas to try to get vaccines into the country. And if one path is not working, you really need to start looking around and not solely depend on someone's goodwill, because they may not. As you know, there's a 3rd wave that's now hovering around and happening. What if the US or some of these developed countries decide to hold off? The Alpha strain, which is the British strain that came out, there's evidence that now there appears to be some more variants coming in Europe, right? So you cannot solely depend on that. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind and engage all the necessary groups to help us obtain vaccines as quickly as possible. And if we get some coming in, and at some point we have enough coming in, but some people are also willing to produce or give us suppliers with vaccines, then we can sort of back off and take what we've been offered rather than rely on people's goodwill. The last point I will make is a simple fact that it's a great idea. We need to put things into place in making vaccine. It's a global pandemic that it's affecting everyone. I do believe the presidency or the government makes the necessary effort. There will be a lot of, for example, the AU will be able to willing to partner with Ghana and support the country. Because if Ghana suddenly can put the manpower, I mean, we look at the universities we have fine universities. I do believe we can create that employment. And Ghana will be able to be at the forefront, a seat at the table, but also be able to produce vaccines for the rest of Africa. So I think we just have to put the right people at the table, and we can achieve them.
Right. But you say you are disappointed the few days you have been in the country looking at people's compliance with the protocols. What advice can you give? Looking that you have been a COVID-19 ICU team leader, you have seen people on their beds, and you've seen a lot of them just die because of COVID-19. What would be your advice?
I unfortunately have had the pleasure of watching too many people die. You know, I'll be the one spending 2 hours or more in the room when they will first be admitted in the ICU. I've taken care of Caucasians and Ghanaians in America, and I watched them die with family members not being able to come say goodbye. So I feel it. I think I was shocked when I first got into the country. It's easy for us to speak when we're outside because we've seen a whole different situation. I get into Ghana, and I saw one example that's so vivid in my mind was I saw a big bus, and it was filled with people, and I couldn't see a single person wearing a mask. And for me, that sort of broke my heart, because that is a risk, that's a disaster. You know, if we get into the third wave, no matter what government does, you're gonna have to shut down.
The bus operators are supposed to insist on the protocols.
I've made the fact that this morning I'm so humbled by what you guys have been going through, that being here, I've learned a lot, and I'm just humbled by how I do believe that Ghana has been blessed. We're lucky, we're very fortunate, because if we get any strong, crazy variant, I don't know how we control it. And that's the more the need to really purchase vaccines, because people cannot adhere to these rules or protocols.
Okay.
So you have to do everything you can to.
All right. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. And when the pandemic broke initially, Dr. Samuel Kojo Amoakohene was giving us advice from the US, particularly about how we could use one ventilator, split it for multiple uses, one ventilator, so that many people can use it. Because that was what he was experimenting in the US, to assist people. There were many people who needed ventilators, but you go to the hospitals, there's one, and there are too many people who are dying and need the ventilator. Thank you so very much, Dr. Samuel Kojo Amoakohene. He's an anesthesiologist, a COVID-19 ICU team leader at ECHN Health Network, Connecticut. He's co-founder and president of Global Partnerships, Halodyne LLC. I'll share a few of your messages, then we take a break. When we return, we have the security experts joining us. And this one coming from Togbi. I always have a difficulty pronouncing your second name, your name really. It says, it is also important to consider the efficacy of the vaccine we intend to use. We might just end up like some South American countries like Chile, which vaccinated more than half of their citizens, yet infections still going up, leading to lockdowns. For me, a more globally known vaccine is better off spending our scarce resources on. Thank you for that message. Togbi Ngoyiri Fiaga.
A tough one.
Yes, forgive me if I didn't pronounce the name right. Then AJ Nyavo, John Nyavo, you say, how can President Akufo-Addo, a former foreign minister of this country, how come he's unable to use his diplomatic channels and friendships to buy genuine COVID-19 vaccines for us quickly? Okay, we should stop shopping in the black market. Jama Woyele says, with the benefit of hindsight, avoiding. Okay, your message doesn't help the public. I'm not going to read it. But I'll advise you that when the vaccine is ready, please go for your jab. Dedome Kafui says, Newsfile, we could not vaccinate even 500,000. We have vaccinated 1 million, please. Yet we're able to register over 14 million to vote. All right. Collins Little Tete says that the politics surrounding the vaccine should be with clarity. At the end of the day, let there be no excuses, no explanations, and there will be certainly no regrets. Emery says it's a shame we keep proving Dr. Kwame Nkrumah wrong for saying the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. It is like we have been cursed to keep taking wrong decisions since independence. Kweku Abeku says, Newsfile, I took my first jab of the vaccine in the first week of April. I went to Accra to take a second jab because that was where I took the first one. Please, I want to find out if I am still protected when I take the second jab. Yes, they say you are still protected, and just wait when it's time for the second jab and you go for it. I'll read a final one from Charles Rekubrobe, tweeting at iTarzan. He says, local manufacturers may claim to be ready, but the patent holders of the current vaccines have to okay the technology transfer and assure quality. Future solution for now problems. Thank you. We take a break. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile we put Ghana first. And let me share this with you quickly, very important, before we move on to the security issues that we have to deal with. Now, in law we say IT, intellectual property expert, when it comes to issues of patents, shares a view with me and says that we will not we don't need a license from the patent holders when it comes to the vaccines that we are talking about. We don't need a license from the patent holders. The patents are not registered in Ghana and as such have no legal effect here in Ghana. Thank you so very much. Sarah Anko is a very reputable IT expert and sharing that with us. Thank you so very much. So in this country, we have literally all the knowledge that we can rely on to do the things that we require as far as these things are concerned. This show, as always, is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and as close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. DBS Industries, anything roofing. As far as you're looking for quality, that's where to go. Robert & Sons, seeing is believing. Waylead, home is where you start from. Star Assurance, that's your solid partner. First Code Management Services. Industry, get it right. The new school, knowledge, compassion, and leadership. Now, let's begin with the issue of the broad day, brazen criminal activity that has gotten attention a lot more because police officers are also now being killed. Let's quickly listen to the IGP, watch this, and then listen to the IGP on the Adedimpo murder investigations and IGP on the general situation of crime in the country.
As I indicated, when crimes are committed, you have procedure that you go through. You activate your informants and you take the necessary steps. Apart from intensifying your patrols and making sure that it doesn't occur again, you start your investigative processes, which we have already put in motion. I had instructed the Commissioner CID to take over the case because of the importance we attach to it. So he has started, and I'm sure, as I indicated, we will definitely get them. We will get them. Every society has its own issues, has its own crimes. Whoever says that we are out of touch with the system or with the society is not studying the topography of the West African sub-region as of now. Anybody or any security analysis worth a salt will know that the West African sub-region is currently experiencing a high wave of crime in all the countries. If you compare all the countries, there's a high wave of crime. It doesn't mean that we should fold our arms and say that we'll not do anything. Yes, we are investigating, as I indicated, and that is part of the investigation as to why an officer on duty was not wearing a bulletproof vest. We are actually doing what we can to protect the people of Ghana. There's no society in the world where there's no crime. Even in the US, in the UK, Sweden, and all those countries where I would say they more or less have everything, they still have crime. The only place that doesn't have crime is heaven, and we are not in heaven. So if any so-called security analysis says that we are not on top of our game, that's why this is not happening. I mean, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right. So you have just been listening to the IGP. And now let's try and run you through a bit of the little history of what has happened in the course of the period of the year so far, and why some would say we are in a state of insecurity. So, armed robbers shot and killed a police officer and a 40-year-old mother of 3 in a bullion van robbery. That's what we are referring to. That is what has brought all the attention here. But in January, armed robbers shot dead a young policeman escorting a bullion van, bolted with the monies in the bullion van. So this is not the first, right? This is not the first. In January, this happened, and a policeman was shot and killed. Again in January, armed men besieged a church in Oyibi, shot at the head pastor, and stabbed a worshipper. In February, armed robbers attacked and then snatched a Sokore Mampong MCE Ali Seidu's official vehicle at gunpoint. So the MCE is the head of the security for that particular area, and they don't care. Indiscriminately, they pick anybody at all. In March, a bullion van was attacked at Bachona Spintex in a daylight operation by some unknown armed men. That's in March. The driver of the van escaped while the police officer was disarmed and assaulted with a mallet. That was in March. Okay, so we're sharing some more with you. In April, robbers shot and killed a couple returning from the bank in Sekendi, Takrade. We are showing you these brazen attacks. Then in May, a census trainer was shot dead in Cape Coast while returning from a census training. A head teacher was killed on the Atebubu Kwame Danso Highway in a suspected robbery attack in the Bruno region. In June this month, the Gimpa Fiesta Royal Road robbery. I'm sure you have all become accustomed to that, become aware of that. They are actually there, and they have been disturbing a lot of people. A forex bureau close to the police headquarters in Osu was raided by armed men, and this shocked a lot of people. Very close to the police headquarters, just a stone throw away from the police headquarters. Then armed robbers fired at a victim at Pig Farm and made away with his backpack. So, was it Thursday or just yesterday, there was another bullion van attack, as you may have heard. Now, Dr. Baumia, in 2019, when these matters, were getting troubling, made a promise. He, together with the Interior Minister, Ambrose Derry, they said on-duty police officers are going to bear weapons, bulletproof, and other protective gear. Bulletproof and other protective gear will be given to all the officers on duty. He indicated this at a burial ceremony of a police officer, Muhammad Awal, who was killed in the line of duty at Ibuakwa. The president now tells us that there's no insecurity in Ghana per statistics for the first quarter of 2020 and the first quarter of 2021. In the first quarter, the president refers to the facts, and those are facts that the statistics show. Issues of robberies, you had 520. And then in 2021, in the first quarter, you have 491. So 520 in the first quarter in 2020 as against 491 in 2021. And that is the basis for what the president said just a while ago when he was receiving the award or being decorated with a doctorate degree at the University of, was it Cape Coast or Winneba then? Yeah. Now, I just mentioned to you that unknown assailants shot at a bullion van at the Ochireko and Dominasi portion of the Winneba-Accra stretch. The crew involved a driver and 2 policemen on board with an amount of 550,000. Fortunately for them, they escaped. The gunshots and were rescued by the Winneba Divisional Police, who escorted them back to Accra. And this happened on the 17th of this month. Let me go to the phone lines now and begin this conversation with Police Public Affairs Director Sheila Kessie Abeye Bachman. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsfile.
Senior, thank you too, and congratulations. I wish I had joined you in the studio, but I had to be in the Upper East region for duty. And your producers also contacted me just this morning. It's tight, but I still had to make time to join so that I can let Ghanaians know what we are doing for them to feel assured.
Right.
So you have listed a number of cases. Investigations are progressing in several of them, the cases that you have listed. In fact, in most of them, arrests have been made and the suspects have been connected to the crime according to the evidence that investigations have been able to get. And some are even facing prosecutions. And this is across the country because the cases you listed show across the country. So let us be assured. Now, as we heard in the clip that you played, as the IGP said, the topography of crime within the sub-region give credence to the fact that massive work is being done by the police in Ghana and the security agencies in Ghana. And that is how and why the people of Ghana and the communities in Ghana are safe. It is a bigger picture. It's like a puzzle, or let me even attribute it to the human body. When one finger gets hit, yes, it affects the body, but still the body must be taken care of while necessary efforts are taken to cure that finger. So in essence, several preventive measures are taken around the clock and across the country to prevent the incidences of crime. But when crimes like the ones that you have listed occur, we see it as a breach. It's a breach of some of our security strategies. And therefore, extra attention is paid to those breaches in order to arrest the perpetrators so that they are not able to occasion breaches again. But also to keep the larger picture intact, the greater security to prevent the incidences from happening and across the country. In fact, a lot is being done, and the police need the support of all of you, viewers, listeners, and the panelists in the studio to carry out our constitutional mandate.
Yeah.
In the last few days, as you said, and then related it to the billion van incidents and some incidences in the course of the year, people have used the word insecurity, because of the privilege of having the media space. And that is causing more fear and panic. It is not the reality. the use of the word must be looked at. See, I told you that I was in Bulga. So I am descending to the south. Right now, I am in Ashanti region. Since Wednesday, I have been in Bulga. I spent 2 nights in the Upper East region, and I have been descending. And now I am in the Ashanti region. Hopefully tomorrow, I'll be in Accra. If you move beyond your bounds to the entire country, you can tell the greater. You can tell you can see the bigger picture and tell the story as accurately as it is, so that people will continue to support the police. People will see that the bigger picture of preventing crime is what is happening, and then together we can all forge ahead. Now, another advice. So people have the privilege of the media space, and then they make all sorts of allegations and claims in the media space, causing unnecessary fear and panic. Please, perhaps I should also use this to appeal, particularly to those who have the privilege of the media space, that if you have all this information you claim to have, and you do not let the police know, so that we can arrest the situation, but you go ahead making all those claims, what will be your agenda, or what will be the motive? So please, fellow Ghanaians, this is not something that we should just be using the word insecurity. But when you look at the bigger picture, police is at work. We are preventing incidences of crime from happening. Let us be assured that the breaches that have been occasioned, we are working hard enough to arrest the perpetrators and bring them to book.
All right. Well, the reality of members of the public is far different from the picture you paint this morning, because as they continue to hear the reports, which are the real things that are happening, facts of the situations that are happening, they are unable to reconcile that with the assertions that there is no insecurity. So if you can help, at what point can they say or suggest that they are living in fear because there is insecurity?
There are breaches, for which reason we have re-strategized to ensure that the perpetrators will be arrested. Because for as long as the criminals are in the society, we cannot rest, because they will continue to perpetrate crime. But for the greater majority of whatever is happening, preventive measures are taken to stop the incidences from happening while we still work to arrest the criminal. So let us not play into the agenda of the criminal, because if we do not support and then we continue to play into the agenda of the criminals, which is actually to cause fear, so that there will be mistrust in the system, then what you do is to demoralize your security system and the structures, and then you lose focus.
Right.
So
as
the picture, the reports.
Right.
Reports are from several incidences that happen, and then as journalists or as media practitioners, we pick and choose what to tell the people. So let's give the bigger picture. As we admit that there have been security breaches and we work hard to arrest them, let us also admit that there are a lot that are being done to ensure that people are safe. That is why you and I
so for example,
able to go about our daily duties.
Yeah.
You're able to wake up, go to work, come back home. Yes, knowing that there is a criminal out there whom the police are working hard together with the security apparatus to arrest. But be assured, remain calm, and give any information you can give to the security services. Right.
So in 2019, this is people's reality. In 2019, a policeman is killed in what people found to be a very needless situation. Then the interior minister, the vice president, all make a promise that police people will get bulletproof vests and they will have the necessary, gear to go out and do their work. And they assured that this was going to happen immediately. We are in 2021, and a police officer is killed in a manner that some experts say is quite preventable, it's needless, because he was not protected.
You're right. It is preventable, and that is why the Inspector General of Police said that even the reason why the police officer was not in a bulletproof vest will be looked at. So we have some resources. We work with the resources we have. New, like I said, when breaches occur, we re-strategize. So new instructions are given. As part of the investigation, you don't only work on the criminal aspect, but you look at the lapses in it, even for your own operations, and you resolve them. So for the resources that are given to the police, they are used for the purposes for which they are given. Talking about bulletproof jackets, there are no bulletproof jackets for the almost 40,000 police officers. In fact, yesterday, 2,000 police officers passed out, and so now we are increasing in numbers, and then hopefully Ghanaians will see the visibility they continue to urge us on to have. So the 40,000 plus police officers, not every one of us can wear bulletproof for every duty. In fact, the rules of wearing the fragmentation jackets, it also comes with its own nuances, but that is our internal issue. But for the resources that are available, they are distributed for the work that must be done. You wouldn't like to see
I saw you. I saw you. Sorry, I saw you with the IGP when he went to commiserate with the family, and he was saying that you have a couple of these fragmentation jackets. Is that what you call them? Bulletproofs?
Yes. Yes. Because the reason it is fragmentation jackets, when you say so, they are bulletproof jackets, but it's not as though the bullet will not go in, but it tries to dispel it somehow. So
okay.
It's good to use fragmentation jackets.
Right. So he said you have a couple. That's the word he used, a couple.
Exactly.
That's not good enough.
A couple in this sense means that we have a number and we use them as much as we can use them, and we are actually hopeful. We know the reporting channels that we have to report incidents. So, for instance, when your child has to pay school fees, and, for instance, you are still getting the school fees for the child will not go to the media space to tell the journalist that my father is still getting me my school fees. The child will go to the father. And so we know that efforts are being made. For us as the police service, whatever resources we have, we are using it. But something, look at this. So if you saw every police officer wear the bulletproof jacket and the helmet, what will you say? The best practices does not indicate that every police officer must at every time wear these things, because it also impacts on the people to whom we are giving protection. So we are doing the right thing, and we continue to review them. We also consider the feedback that we get from the public through the media, and we look at the best practices so that our police service will not only be a good police service for Ghana, but internationally recognized. And then you can stay proud everywhere and say that I trust my police service. And that is exactly what we are doing. All we need is for you to paint the picture right, so that those that are not so right, they can be made right. And those that are right, let our citizenry hear about them so they can give the necessary support. So be assured, all the work that must be done to get these criminals arrested is being done. Even if they need external support, we are requesting for them and we are getting them as and when they come in. And all the work that will have to be done are being done. I have told you that it's a bigger picture. It is not just like losing focus and attending to just one issue so that the other issues will remain. We are working hard at it. Ghanaians should be assured.
Okay. I had to leave you at this point because we understand how busy you are. But some of my people who are watching and listening are asking me to ask you to state, when can they say they live in a state of insecurity?
when it is impossible for you to go out of your home, to the market, to work, like when we are in a state that is declared as a state of insecurity by state actors. But for as long as we are able to wake up, we are doing what we have to do. For us, it is a record. For us as the police service, it is a record if no crime is reported. And that is what we aim at. And that is why we take measures to prevent the crimes from happening.
People are concerned. People are concerned that these things brazen criminal act. I mean, who would think that anybody during the day in Sphincters, a busy place as Sphincters, Bachona, who would think that at a place like where this happened around Kolebu, a community where my colleague Evans Mensah has lived before and tells us of the state of the community. The roads are bad, you can't even drive through properly, and the people are such that when they arrest and apprehend someone who is conducting themselves criminally, they will lynch you immediately. That criminals will be bold enough to go into such a community and do what they did. And the concern is these things continue to happen. The police keep announcing a bounty on the head of the criminals, and we don't get any news that they have been arrested, they have been prosecuted, so they are with us. That's the concern.
It is a genuine concern, and we are also concerned. That is why we are taking all the actions necessary to arrest the criminals, because for as long as the criminals are not arrested, we can't rest. And so, but as we do that, we don't leave the rest of the picture. We do the work that we have to do to prevent the incidences from happening. And that is the assurance that we can give Ghanaians, that we are preventing the crimes from happening, even as we take steps to arrest these criminals. So it is a genuine concern, but be assured that we are doing everything we can within our constitutional mandate and everything we have to do, supported by other agencies, to arrest the perpetrators.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. And we wish you the very best as you continue in the journey and assisting to ensure that we are safe. Thank you very much. Sheila Kessie Abeye Bachman is the Director of Public Affairs of the Ghana Police Service. Let me bring in my other guest, Professor Kwesi Enin, who is Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Emmanuel Buka Bombande is UN Senior Mediation Advisor and former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. Also joining these two is John Ewua, CEO, Ghana Association of Bankers. You know that the police have issued a sort of a directive to them that by the end of this month, they should ensure that they have bulletproof bullion vans rather than the farm trucks that they are using presently as bullion vans. Professor Kwesi Enin, if you can help us, first of all, to understand why the president, for example, and the police themselves, and there is this MP, and that really surprises me, but I need to understand. This police officer who is now an MP and whose husband during the campaign was killed by, was shot and killed. And now she is the deputy chair of the Interior and Defense Committee of Parliament. I've heard him, along the week defending the situation and saying that there's no insecurity. And I'm surprised that somebody whose husband was just killed in such a way, how many months ago, and because she's in Parliament, she's in government, she can't seem to see that anything is going on wrong.
Well, Samson, there's a long historicity to the discrepancy as to what security is how it should be given to people, and how people should perceive it. So those of us who are at the receiving end of the service perceive the quality of security as a service differently from the professionals and the politicians whose duty and role it is to ensure that the service is provided in a manner that is effective, that does not sow fear, and that creates societies of stability where people can go about their business. This discrepancy that on the surface seems very simple actually encapsulates some of the unfortunate discrepancies inherent in Superintendent Abeye's submission earlier on about an almost dismissive approach to people's sense of insecurity. I mean, I think there is no doubt at all that people do feel insecure, because when you take up an arm or a gun against a representative of the state, then it means you've made a conscious choice also to stand and resist any response that would come thereof. So the public's response to all murders, all attacks will be one of fear, but particularly when an armed officer is then murdered in that manner, people feel a sense of fear. And I think to try to dismiss it does not capture the mood of society. And I think one of the ways, and actually today, Samson, my real dream today was to come with solutions. How do we move forward? One of the steps that I think the police can do is to learn about strategic communication. How do you communicate to a people who feel frightened, who feel let down, who feel hemmed in by people who are having guns and are using them indiscriminately? How do you use words of reassurance and to stretch out your hand in a manner that says, please help us. This is a collective challenge. We need a collective solution to the problems that we are facing. So I think the language and the choice of words coming from the service would need the support of a professional communicator to ensure, that they are couched in such a manner that it calms the public, it brings the public on board as collaborators, and as actually purveyors and providers of frontline intelligence, which become critical in the fight against the challenges that we see. My last point, Samson. The understanding of security and insecurity once more shows the split between the providers and the recipients. Okay, what is this security we are talking about? This beast that there's so much misunderstanding about. Who should provide it? And more importantly, how should it be provided in a manner that people feel it serves their interests? But I think the dichotomy between all of us in the studio now and our uniformed friends and the covert operatives is that there's a long history of suspicion and of antagonism. It is surprising to me that at the Otreko incident, Otreko is a place where on a daily basis, there is a police checkpoint that intimidates, that extorts, that abuses, passengers. For 15 years, I've always mentioned the behavior of officers between Senior Briku and Commander. Consistent behavior that does not help in supporting Mrs. Abeye's point about the police's need of support from the public. We need two things, Samson, that does not cost any money. One is attitudinal change from the police. The second, behavioral change. Change that creates a conducive environment for partnership, for engagement, for the sharing of information, and for seeing the provision of security as a shared responsibility. That will contribute immensely to creating societies that are safe, secure, and can go about their businesses.
I'll come to Dr. Bombande shortly, but Professor Kwesiedin, we have had let's go to the solutions quickly because, like you said, that should be our attitude now. The NCCE has just brought to the fore a research they have done in border towns and villages in the country, and it shows clearly the threat of violent extremism, and the respondent seems to show clearly that joblessness is the biggest threat. How much of this explains what is going on and what ought to be done?
Well, yes, Samson, thank you very much. It's not just about joblessness that is the problem. It's also about the very nature of our borders, the porosity. It's about the role of itinerant preachers who then exploit some of the fundamental structural challenges that we have. So that though the joblessness is a problem, the joblessness in itself does not have agency to transform and translate into extremism. And then by extension, the violent part. Different people can become extreme in terms of their beliefs, but the transition from that extreme belief to now deciding to be violent is something else altogether. And I think when we talk about border towns, let me be specific here. From Hamle to Paga to Kusiga to Kulungugu, yes, the borders are there, but they are so porous that even a sieve is tight. We are not investing enough monies in those border communities to be able to create a sense of, safety. But more disturbingly, once more, is that the presence of border security agents are perceived by the communities as an imposition of traditional norms of doing business. So, for example, and I spent months last year traveling around these border communities in all the 6 northern regions. There is a perception that official state representatives are an imposition, they are guests, and therefore they should not make the rules how people should live. So if you see the smuggling that goes out, either fertilizer, plastic goods, the theft of motorcycles, the cattle rustling, all those involved in gold mining, there is a community support and an infrastructure that allows these criminal networks to survive. The end result is that those who bring extremist ideologies almost have communities that are receptive to their presence, that are receptive to their narrative. So the joblessness is only one part of a very big picture that I think my name, Bombande, can speak to much more eloquently than I can. But this is a problem that we need to begin to look at much more carefully. The border towns and the way there's a certain lawlessness that makes it almost impossible for it to be controlled.
All right. Dr. Bobande, tell us how you see what is going on and what steps do you think are required immediately to stem this tide?
Thank you so much, my good friend and brother, Samson. My first observation is to congratulate you for all your awards. I'm particularly excited about the category of democracy and peace building, and I identify myself with you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
To Kweku in the studio and my colleague panelists. Let me say that Professor Eni has, in my view, clearly shown how we should go, and I'll follow in his direction, that we should be more forward-looking in terms of how can we respond to the crisis we have. But in order to do that, there are certain quick compliments I want to make to Professor Eni's submission. And I want to begin with a very simple understanding to compliment Professor Eni of insecurity. What is it? It is simply the anxiety you experience when you feel vulnerable or when you are in a state of calling it you are insecure. Now, if you feel an anxiety or if you have an experience of an anxiety because you feel vulnerable, it begins with an individual experience. But then we collectively share our individual experiences and insecurity then becomes collective. But it begins with the individual. So my first forward-looking point here is, it is very important for the Ghana Police Service to acknowledge and accept that there is insecurity in order to be able to then determine how we go forward. If we deny it, then we are actually creating the problem, or we are not going to be able to address the problem when we deny it. Towards the end of her interview, Mrs. Abayi Bachman was basically talking about, she said, when you cannot leave your house and when you feel besieged and state authority imposes restrictions, that is not insecurity, because that is what she tried to describe as insecurity. That is a state of emergency because the level of insecurity has developed into an unmanageable crisis. And when the crisis becomes unmanageable, intervention through martial law is then to restrict people. Now, we cannot take that state of emergency and describe it as insecurity. And so we need to make that distinguishing clarity. And quickly related to that is leadership means accepting responsibility, but the Ghana Police Service are not alone in this. So on one hand, they are in the front line, and they must accept the responsibility of leadership in how we are dealing with the environment of insecurity. And to that extent, therefore, there is an associated kind of connection. One of the reasons Ghanaians feel insecure is precisely because they are aware that the West Africa region is insecure with kidnappings and the type of atrocities of violent crime that you cannot describe. So when your leadership of the police hierarchy want you to look at what is happening in the region, they are increasing your sense of vulnerability. Because basically what they are communicating is, don't worry, we are doing better than the others. And what the Ghanaians are feeling is, but in the other countries, it's because the police was not able to respond. That's why we see what is happening there. By asking us to look at what is happening in the region, are you telling us that what is happening in the other countries is also coming to us? So you actually increase their insecurity when you constantly remind them of the fear and anxiety that is happening in West Africa. And that's not the way to go. And that is why communication, as Professor Enin put it, is very important in how you get the people of Ghana on your side. Then my third point on this then is, how does the police, as Mrs. Abayi Bachman requested, get the public to understand and support their operational duties, which is all what we must advocate for, which is all what we must like. My suggestion is you must carry the people along with you. And how you carry the people along with you, as Superintendent Abeyi was talking about, it's not when you respond to the invitation of Samson and begin now to talk about the efforts that are being done. It's more than that. So very quickly, in less than 1 minute, then I'll go to my fourth point and try to wrap up on this. What prevents the police in terms of scenario thinking? That every Friday afternoon, our key media persons know that at police headquarters, there will be a 1 to 2 hour press conference for the media to interact with the police and educate the Ghanaian populace about what the police are doing on each of the issues that you enumerated at the beginning of the program, so that they can say on the attack of the, I call them pickups, they are not bullion vans, on the attack of that pickup in which the police officer was killed, young, very forward-looking young police officer who was killed. We have not yet been able to apprehend the culprits, but our investigations are leading us to a point in which we are confident that very soon we would apprehend them. Just one sentence, and the media says this is what the police are saying on that incident. Then on the other, they give an update. When you do that, you are assuring the public and you are carrying the people with you. But when the people don't hear you, they don't hear your updates. But once in a while, when you engage with the media, you then say, be assured, we are following and we're investigating. It does not help. And so that is part of the strategy of communication that Professor Eni talked about that I would add. Now, my fourth point, in order to take this forward, Professor Eni talked about those who provide the security and the recipients. At the two levels that are mutually reinforcing, I'll frame it another way. Now, the conversation we are having now are the operational levels of how we prevent violent crime and deal with violent crime. But all that is happening in an environment that is systemic and structural. The question is, how did we get to where we are today? Why has there been this sudden surge of the incidences that you enumerated? And it is not the number that counts, but it is the level of atrocity, impunity, and brazen daylight robbery, including taking lives, that accentuates the insecurity in terms of the experiences of people's anxiety. So that if in half of 2021, we might not be counting a huge number, but the numbers that you enumerated, the incidences are such that the public is paralyzed by the enormity of the violence, then you can understand the apprehension in the populace that they feel truly insecure. And how do we deal with that? A system thinking brings us to appreciate the interconnection of the whole of government machinery and the population at large.
All right.
And what I mean by that, okay, I'll be able to come back.
Right.
But very quickly, if Ghana Immigration Service is not able to contain or patrol the proliferation of small arms that are illegal and come across the borders as they do in their huge numbers. And Professor Eni talked about his own research looking at what is happening in our border communities. It doesn't matter how efficient the Ghana Police Service is, violent crime would increase because the Ghana Police, as an agency of the state, is not the same agency that must ensure that arms are not proliferating. So that customs, Ghana Immigration, and the associated agencies who must ensure that our environment is safe because illegal weapons are not proliferating must be able to be functional and efficient and effective.
Okay.
And obviously, finally, the environment.
Right.
And very quickly, in less than 1 minute, I'll wrap this up. the get-rich syndrome, in which 25-year-olds want to be very wealthy and they don't care how. And so they will kill, they will rob. Ritual killings, which is associated with the get-rich syndrome. The incapacity to see ourselves as a Ghanaian community that has humanity as at the center. That even in some extended families, people are prepared to sell their own. Where has society gone? And so when Professor Eni is talking about the new urgent change of behavior and attitude, you begin to see that we need a medium to long-term, very integrated approach to how we bring that about, whilst all that supports the operational duties of the police. I'll leave it here, and when I get the opportunity, I can expand further.
All right. Let me get to John Ewua, CEO of the Association of Bankers, to quickly look at the specific issue of how they are going to move forward. And then when I return, Professor Enin and Dr. Bombande, you should help us with, you spoke about proliferation of arms. And we have heard that, for example, in 2014 or so, we got the statistics from the Small Arms Commission. We don't know what the statistics are now. We're told that we had as many as 2.3 million firearms in private hands in Ghana. And out of this 2.3 million arms, that is in private hands, as much as 47% was unaccounted for. And even for the 53% that the police had registered, they don't monitor to enforce compliance of the conditions for registration. And there were linkages to rise in violent crime, gun violence, so that in 2017, there was an increase of about 27% in gun-related crime. So give us some of the statistics and tell us how we can resolve that. But first, let me get John Ewua specifically on this issue. How are you going to go about the resolution? The IGP is seeking to fast-track an agreement that you had with them to get bulletproof or the proper, gear. We are told that you are not too excited about it because there was a timeline to phase out this farm trucks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samson, and thank you all, to the other participants as well. First, I would like to use the opportunity to send our thoughts and prayers to the family of the police officer who lost his life tragically last Monday, and to the lady who incidentally also lost her life as a result of the robbery. As a banking institution or as an industry, we are very concerned about the spate of robberies, particularly targeting banking infrastructure in the country. And yes, historically, police service have always been our number one stakeholder in management of particularly our cash operations and protection of banking facilities. So that relationship on an ongoing basis is always being reviewed. And just to cast my mind back a little, in response to the rising security risk, particularly with the targeting of banks, somewhere last year, middle of last year, we started stakeholder engagement. We had the discussions with the National Security Minister and his team. The governor himself also convened, I believe, 2 or 3 meetings with the MDs of all the banks. In those meetings, we assessed the situation and devised other ways of mitigating the risk that the industry is confronted with. Of course, we do not have the expertise in the security side, and that is why that side is outsourced to the police who provide and assist us. We also made the IGP and his team also trying to understand exactly what we can do a lot more to improve the security situations. Of course, when we have attacks such as what we just recorded last Monday and the near miss about 2 days ago, It heightens the security a threat that our customers go through. And as banks, we operate in an environment of confidence. And when confidence is lost or waned because of a threat of robbers, banking operations can grind gradually to a minimum level or to a halt. And that is why we work very closely with the security apparatus to at least always be upfront with the security threat that we are exposed to and devise ways of mitigating our risk. As you alluded to, we had a plan with the regulator and the Bank of Ghana to phase out the soft body bullion vans that we have in the system. And here, let me just correct an anomaly that commentators on this matter sometimes make. Cash operations in the country, actually, much as it's a banking activity, is largely outsourced. So when you say purchase of bullion vans, technically, it's not the banks that are going to purchase the bullion vans, because the bucket, the soft body vans that you see around do not belong to the banks. We use third-party cash in transit operators. These are companies that are registered and licensed to conduct the business of assisting the banking industry and other sectors in the movement of specie. So it is not like banks have had to invest in bullion, armored bullions, and we have not. There is a whole business infrastructure or sector that is tasked with the duty of cash operations, moving cash from point A to point B, and it is they are actually the target of that investment. What we can do as an industry is to facilitate and provide the funding that is needed to enable them procure the right equipment to ensure that the business of banking is conducted in a safe and sound manner. To that extent, we are largely in sync with the IGP. Yes, the timeline is very tight, and given the number of armored vans we have in the system, vis-a-vis the volume of cash that we have to move on a daily basis, operationally, it will be a challenge. But as banks, that is why we are there. We need to go sit back and see under the circumstance what is possible. So in a nutshell, I would say that as banks, we are deeply, deeply, deeply worried when such incidents of security breaches are recorded. And as they happen, we liaise with the banking regulator and also with the police service. We are part of the investigative mechanism that is set up, and then we try to uncover what went wrong and what we could do better. I think the point has been made that much as, yes, the police officer was in a soft body van, but perhaps if he was in the right apparatus, the injury could have, or the loss could have been prevented.
Because he needed, I've heard some say he needed a helmet, the proper one, and he would have been saved, because it does appear from how he was shot, if he had something wearing, that could have helped.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, security expert in that area, but of course, if you have, as soldiers go to war and we watch on TV and in movies, we see them in helmets and in vests. Obviously, I'm sure it's to protect them from harm. So if police officers on board our vans or bullion vans, even if the vans are armored, they will still have to be in protective gear. So that is the area that we as banks will be working very closely with the police service to see what we can also do to support in that area to ensure that the business of banking does not also grind to a halt because you have recorded an incident.
Okay. So as we understand, you are in sync with the order from the IGP, even though it is too short, because that's just end of this month. And you are setting that you would have a resolution and move forward from there. So there are no problems.
There are problems. As I speak with you, throughout the week, there's been significant amount of discussions, back and forth, meetings, back and forth, trying to understand how operationally we can bring the directive into action. So those discussions are ongoing, and that is why I would say, of course, the service level may have to come down in terms of cash operation level if we have to go by that directive. So as an industry, we are not taking lightly the incidents that happened, but operationally, there are constraints that practically we have to also be mindful of.
Okay. All right. John, we're CEO of the Ghana Association of Bankers. Thank you very much for your time. And we wish you all the best as you try to work with the police to resolve this and to save the lives of police officers. Well, Kuku, let's have your take on all of these things happening, from the questioning of the type of bullion vans and the directives that have come in, and the general question of security and the brazen nature of the criminal conduct that we are seeing daylight.
It would be naive on my part to suggest there are no Ghanaians, individual citizens of this land, who might feel insecure relative to certain incidents of violence, especially robbery, that has taken place in recent times, or even in the past. It's natural that any citizen who becomes a victim of incidents of violence or armed robbery or robbery will feel insecure as a person, and indeed can transmit it to his community or family members. So really, I'm not about to suggest that there are no people in this country who don't feel insecure or who are not concerned about some of these incidents. What I'm not too sure about is whether you can move from this correct premise and generalize it to suggest there's a state of national insecurity. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, and it's not a factual picture. That's my view. But you see, the police service and other security agencies are working to cure this mischief because they realize that it has an impact on people's sense of security, as well as even the economic development of this country. And I have to be very honest that this is not the first time this country has been challenged or confronted with this phenomenon. And each time, the various administrations that have come and gone, including the police administration itself, regardless of the leadership, they've all recognized these things. Look, if you go back, I have this report here, dated March 1997, is the Justice Archer report, some to put it short, otherwise it's report of the Presidential Commission into the Ghana Police Service, the Executive Summary, Part 1 and Part 2. It was in recognition of the state of the Ghana Police. Not just morale, but equipment, the training, the facility, the recruitment and all that. Beyond this book, Ghana Police Service Transformation Program,
the transformation
2017
agenda
to 2022, and former IGP Apietu. Even though, strictly speaking, if you read this book carefully, there had been a strategic plan 2010 to 2015 earlier. So they incorporated those parts into this new document. And something each one of these documents here, then of course you can add this national security policy strategy. It's a clear recognition of authorities in this country, law enforcement authorities, political leadership, security leadership, that we have a problem. So it is not as if, because all of us feel, not everybody feels insecure, it means there is no problem. There is a challenge for law enforcement and security management of this country. And I believe, if we have to be honest, is that all these things, in terms, if you read all, you see that we know what to do. It is how to do it. The commitment that we must show to operationalize these fine documents. And I have to be honest, they've done so. You were talking with the woman, the lady, I'm sorry, the name escapes me. Sheila, about ammo, the bulletproof vest. She was right when she said that they don't have enough for everybody. And it's not everybody at every time that needs that.
That's right. That's right.
If you read this Appeal 2 document, if I may call it so, 2019 results here, they bought 4,500 level, and I don't understand, I'm sure Professor Kwisini will explain, or Bombardi will explain, 400 body armor vests were bought. It's insufficient, in my candid opinion. But it's a recognition of the fact that there is the need for such resources to be brought on board. So they bought it. They bought 2,000 ballistic helmets. They bought 250 body cameras. They established an establishment of motorbike patrol unit to fight armed robberies and those things. In fact, it was on a pilot basis in Accra, Tamale, and Kumasi. I'm told now it is moved from pilot to functional. Then the training of 15,000 community protection agents. All this may be insufficient, including vehicles and things. But it's a recognition that, look, we need to fight crime, we need to enforce law, but you can do it with the equipment and the training of the personnel. In fact, I think in terms of personnel, we are still short of the UN standard. We're supposed to be looking for 1 to 500, but we are around 1 to 800 or so. So in my view, it is not very fair sometimes to create the impression that the police are doing nothing at all. I think they are doing a lot within the constraints of limited resources. And it's better to encourage them than, to subject them to some of the analysis that sometimes come out that creates the impression as if nothing at all is being done. Okay. That is, look, there's now a police intelligence directorate. When the BNI special branch were separated, it created a little problem for a while. You need intelligence-led policing. Many of these things going on. If police intelligence were up to date, in terms of the equipment and things, I believe the fight against crime would be easier.
All right.
Okay? We now have a police forensic laboratory, don't we? We've had that for about five or 6 years, perhaps even more. This shows that, look, we are beginning to think that technology must aid the fight against crime. Some of these things that have happened with CCTV, of course, some were privately owned, but also state-owned CCTV have come on board to identify some of those criminal elements. At least it gives you a picture of where to trail them. So I don't think it's a zero option that as a nation we're having. But I'm okay with those who think that, look, let's do more in terms of personnel recruitment, in terms of training, in terms of reorientation, and there's a little bit of corruption too in the system.
All right.
Okay, if you go to the small arms place, how do the arms come in?
Yeah.
We have this commission on small arms, all that. They are doing everything possible. But see, some of our immigration elements, border patrol elements, are part and parcel of the problem.
Koku, it's very easy to get to procure arms in Ghana.
Yes, it's part of the problem.
If you are looking for a pistol, it's very, very easy.
It's part of the problem.
And go check. If you hear some of the experts talk about it, people don't trust it. But it is police officers who lead people to get the arms.
Yes, it's true.
Okay? And some of us, we are talking from experience, that we have experienced some of these things. And I had this, client who needed to surrender his gun because he's not a Ghanaian. He came into the country, stayed and finished. He was leaving, and he had registered a gun. He said, I want to surrender it. Now, you're going to check through the process, and the police who are supposed to assist the surrendering process are suggesting to you who is ready to buy it.
Yeah. I hear you. And it's part of the problem. The corruption of the system itself is part of the problem.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. We'll return and then we'll bring the experts back to give us their final views on the solutions. And for the banks too, I will share a reasoned view, expert view from Kweku Enchibwe-Siakon on how you can avoid all of this with dealing with your cash. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis platform. Is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. DBS Industries, that's your roof masters. Robert & Sons, seeing is believing. Way Lead, home is where you start from, so get a good home. Star Assurance, your solid partner. First Code Management Services, that's industry, get it right. The New School, knowledge, compassion, and leadership. And my outfit is by Habil's Kotera, and you can call them 0200 84 1988. They are at Ajiringano and will make you look good. All right. Now, Dr. Ening and Professor Ening and Dr. Bombande, we have a very limited time to go, but let's try it this way. In 2 minutes, Professor Ening, how will you deal with the questions of terrorist acts in our neighboring countries and how it may influence what is happening here? The Nigerian jailbreakers, we understand, could also be an issue. So how do you look at all of that and the proliferation of the arms situation? Hello? Okay, Professor Ening, let's get Dr. Bombande quickly. You say this is a crisis. So I'm thinking about it in the area of proliferation of arms, because it is the arms that embolden them to do the things the way they are doing. What can we do about that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Samson. Let me take just a quick step back to clarify. From our earlier conversation, when Kweku Bako talks about national insecurity, it conveys a totally different meaning. So our conversation is not suggesting that there is national insecurity, because national insecurity is on the borderline of an emergency because of the nature of the widespread and the threat to civilian lives. What we are talking about is the state in which there is a surge in the incidences of violent crime that has accentuated insecurity. And to that extent, to acknowledge it in order to address it. And this is different from national insecurity. And I want to be clear that none of us talked about national insecurity. And moving on to that, to respond to your question, I started talking about the underlying systemic issues that we must address in order to deal better with the operational. And I want to borrow from your earlier discussion. You and Kweku Bako and Dr. Amoako Hene agreed that you cannot effectively respond to the pandemic in terms of vaccine infrastructure and distribution without the consensus of thought and thinking that includes political consensus. I'll borrow that and bring it into this same discussion. And what it means is, number one, in order to be effective in dealing with the proliferation of small arms, we are better off when we tackle that problem at a decentralized level. But that will mean, and you gave an example of the municipal chief executive who ended up also being part of a victim. But you see, psychologically, the DCEs and the MCEs see central government to be largely responsible for security. Okay. Though we all know that they are the heads of the district and municipal security councils.
Right.
So if I take it from there, we must reach consensus on how to elect our DCEs and MCEs and clarify their roles in comprehensive approach.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bombande. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Professor Kwesi Ening, I have your attention now on the arms situation, which emboldens these criminals. In 1 minute, how do we deal with that?
Well, I think how we deal with it is to go back to the original cabinet letter that argued for the establishment of a regulatory body. That regulatory body must be independent of government, which should be the Ghana National Commission on Small Arms. Unfortunately, what we have is an emasculated institution that doesn't have the capacity to deliver on the small arms issue. Until we go back to the drawing board, authorizing and empowering the commission to do the work that it was established to do, we will have this problem of a politicized problem of arms acquisition, of licensing regime, and of course of import and exports. We need to change that so that the National Commission becomes the lead agency. Final point, you may have all the grand strategic documents relating to the Ghana Police Service. If you take the last strategic document, only 1 point out of the 13, the reconciling of.
All right. Unfortunately, the lines are getting terrible there for us. But thank you also very much, Professor Kwesienin, Dr. Emmanuel Bombande, Kweku Bako, Editor-in-Chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. Thank you so very much. I said I was going to share something for the bankers, but we'll try and publish it so that you see Kweku Nchubu Esiako's way of what he calls the DigiCD, safe and secure mobile money transactions and cashless economy, so that you have what you call DigiCD, paperless, coinless, in the form of existing legal tender that avoids the situation that we have now. Thank you also very much. I'm Samson Ladia Yenene. God willing, we'll come your way next week with another edition of Newsfile.